What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't time or money or opportunity? What if it's the story you've been telling yourself about what's possible? I recently finished reading Start With Yourself by Emma Grede, and instead of giving me a list of business strategies, it gave me something I didn't realize I needed: a renewed sense of ambition. This is the first episode in a three-part series where I'm sharing some of the lessons that challenge me the most. Today, we're talking about why so many high achievers are playing smaller than they're capable of and how to change that. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friend. I'm Dr. Lisha Taylor. And of course, I'm here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income. That means that if we were, for some reason, unable to work due to a car accident, a medical illness, a chronic condition, mental health disorder, that we still have money coming in. Because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. And so one of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance. And I know, as well as anybody, that getting this is not necessarily fun, and all insurance agents are not created equal. However, Pradeep Otto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They are who you want to contact if you need long-term disability insurance or life insurance. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best. If you're in need of life insurance or disability insurance, be sure to reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. I don't know if you've ever had this happen before, but every once in a while, you read a book that doesn't necessarily teach you something you've never heard before. Instead, it reminds you of the person you want to become. And that's exactly what Start With Yourself by Emma Grede did for me. As physicians, we're surrounded by conversations about burnout, documentation, insurance companies, student loans, everything that's difficult about medicine. And those conversations do matter. They're real. But somewhere along the way, I think many of us stop dreaming as big as we once did. We stop believing we're the kind of people that can build extraordinary businesses, write best-selling books, create generational wealth, or completely reinvent our careers. Emma Grede's story reminded me that extraordinary lives aren't reserved for extraordinary people. They're built by ordinary people who make bold decisions over and over again. This isn't a book review. It's a conversation about the ideas that challenged me the most, and I hope they'll challenge you too. All right, everyone. So as many of you know, or if you didn't know, here is my little PSA, is I love to read. I read a lot of books. Sometimes I'll read in the morning before I go to work if I wake up early enough. And oftentimes I like to read before bed. Helps me make sure that I'm like off of my phone so the bright lights aren't keeping me up at night, but also gives me a chance to kind of like unwind and relax and think deeply about something. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird like that, but I love to read a lot of different books. And I'm nosy at baseline. I like to say intellectually curious, but I like to learn from other people. I like to read memoirs from other famous people. Obviously, I'm a money nerd, so I like to read money books. And so it's a kind of a hodgepodge of everything: self-improvement, memoirs, biographies, finance books, that sort of thing. And on social media, I've been seeing a lot about Emma Grede and her book, Start With Yourself. And so I got the book and I decided to read it. And it was really interesting because, one, I found the book intriguing. You know, I may not agree with everything that she says, but I definitely was inspired by a lot of what was said. Highly recommend the book, but it inspired me to sort of think about what are some ways that I can think about my life differently, about my money differently, about my business differently, about my career differently. And so I wanted to share this first in a series of 3 kind of episodes on some of the life lessons, career lessons, business lessons, finance lessons that I sort of was reminded of after reading the book. All right, let's get started. Number 1 is one of the things that I sort of was reminded of as I was reading this was to let myself be inspired by big thinkers. You know, one of the biggest things this book actually did for me was reignite my ambition. Now, let me just be transparent. I am not someone who lacks ambition. I tend to be a big thinker. I tend to think outside of the box, but I think that sometimes I put a limit on myself on what I think is possible. And this book reminded me to not do that. For those who might be unfamiliar with Emma Grede, she is someone who has built or helped build lots of companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, she is like co-founder of Good American, the blue jeans company that was co-founded by Khloe Kardashian. She did Skims with Kim Kardashian. She did the company Off Season with Kristen Juszczyk and lots of other successful businesses. Right? This woman is worth, I think, like $400 million or something crazy like that.
So anyway, very, very successful. But, one of the things that I was talking about that I kind of learned from her, gleaned from her, is that sometimes we spend maybe so much time consuming content about burnout and limitations and barriers that we actually forget what's possible. And reading her story reminded me that there are people creating incredible things every day. And not necessarily because they were special or because they were born into money, because she certainly was not, but because they decided to try. One of the quotes that really stuck out to me was, if you're not hearing no from time to time, you haven't found the edge of what's possible. And this has been very true in my own life. I remember when I was a first year resident and I had this website, this blog, this finance blog, if you will, and I realized that I needed to make more money. I was a first year resident. I wasn't making that much money at my main job, but I had some credit card debt that I wanted to pay off. I wanted to eventually be able to move into my own apartment and not to have a roommate. So I knew I needed to bring in more money. And I thought to myself, well, I don't have time to work a second job because I'm barely holding on with my first job, with this main job. So how can I make some extra money? And I had this blog that I was doing for free at the time where I was just like writing articles each week on finance and publishing them on my website. And I thought to myself, how could I make some more money from this? And then I had the brilliant idea of I could sell ads, maybe get companies and advertisers to market on my website, and then I could charge them each month for it. And I remember thinking, is this crazy? Am I crazy for thinking this? Is it possible? Does anybody even read my website? Would advertisers even go for it? And I remember talking to actually Kevin MD at the time. I don't know if you all have heard of Kevin MD, but he has a very big and prominent blog site. I don't even know how I met him. I know I ended up I think maybe I just started publishing a bunch of articles on his blog site back in the day or whatever. But anyway, I reached out to him because he has advertisers on his site. And I remember asking him like, hey, how did you do this? How are you making money from this? And he basically said he was pitching the advertisers, and he gave me some ideas on things that I could do myself. And I remember listening to him give me this advice and thinking, is this possible for me? Like, yeah, you've done it. And yeah, you've been successful, but you're also a guy and I'm a female and I'm an African-American female and I'm a resident, and would anybody even pay me? And I remember having to get the negativity essentially out of my mind and think about what might be possible and just give it a shot. And I remember my mentor at one point saying, Lisha, you have to be willing to accept that you might hear some no's, but you still need to go forth and you still need to try. And I remember doing that. And I remember sending out a ton of emails and a ton of pitch emails, and I got ignored a lot. I definitely got ignored a ton, but some people said yes. Some people were willing to have conversations with me, and I was able to make the blog site profitable. And I was bringing home several $1,000s a month at one point when I was in residency from my blog site. And so I'm saying this not to brag, but to just kind of give you an example of the fact that I had to remove the negativity from my own mind and rethink what might be possible and just go forth and do it. And that's one of the things that I gleaned from this book of letting myself be inspired by other people and reminding myself to think big about what might be possible for me. And one of the things I want you to ask yourself as you're listening to this is, what dream have you quietly shrunk over the past few years that you need to ignite? Is it a business? Is it a book? Is it investing? Maybe you want to advance to a certain rank or whatever in your job. Whatever it is, let yourself think bigger again. And it could be something simple like my example where, I was trying to monetize a website. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you've always wanted to publish a book, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing. Maybe you have always wanted to branch out on your own. Maybe you wanted to start your own private practice. Maybe you want to do some consulting. Maybe you want to invent a product. Maybe you want to sell a course. I don't know. Just give yourself permission to think big again. I think it's easy to think big when we're younger. People ask us what we want to be when we grow up, or maybe when we're in college and we're trying to pick a major and we're trying to think about what career we want. And then somewhere along the way, reality sets in and we're just trying to get a job to support ourselves and make money for our families. And we just get stuck on autopilot. But give yourself permission to stop and to pause and to think about, what might you want? If you had this genie, higher power, if you believe in God, if you had God, whatever you believe in, if they were willing to grant you the desire of your heart in terms of something that you could ask for in terms of business or career, what would that thing be? What would you want? Do you want to publish a book? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to advance in your career? Allow yourself to think bigger again. And that's one of the things that I took away when I was reading this book, of just giving myself permission to dream big, to think big, and to go after what I want. All right, so that's the first thing. The second lesson that I was sort of reminded of is to stop making excuses and figure it out. One of the most inspiring parts of this book was learning about Emma Grede's story. And I know that she's famous, but I didn't know that much about her before I read the book. And this is a mixed woman, right? Black father, white mother, grew up in East London, which is not a particularly well-off area, raised by a single mother, didn't even graduate from high school, and somehow ended up becoming one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, who is now now worth, as I mentioned, like hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, how could she do that? Right? She grew up in poverty. She didn't grow up in a two-parent household. She didn't have all of these fancy business connections when she started, but yet she was still able to be massively successful. That's one of the things that I, took away is I think that sometimes in life we say, oh, other people are luckier than we are. Or for someone who's single, maybe they're like, oh, well, you can do that because you're married. Or for somebody who doesn't have money, maybe they're thinking that other people are successful because they came from money. Or for somebody else, they are thinking, oh, you know what? I had to take out student loans for school and that's why I'm behind. I think it's very easy to make an excuse for why we are not where we want to be. But I think that there's something valuable about people who can accept where they started and still find a way to figure it out and be successful and stop relying on someone to just hand you the keys to success or open the door to the life that you want, but being someone who is willing to go out and grab it. One of the quotes that I really loved from the book was the fact that she acknowledged that anyone who would be a good mentor for you probably does not have time to mentor you. And I wanted to bring that up because I think that when we realize that there is a gap between where we are and where we want to be, our next step is usually, okay, well, how do I get there? And maybe we can identify or envision or think of people who are where we want to be. And if they're close to you or in proximity to you, we have a tendency to ask them to mentor us. And so I really appreciated in the book that she acknowledged that anybody who would be a good mentor for you probably doesn't have time to mentor you. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the reality, right? People who you are looking up to, people who we probably want to mentor you have busy lives. And asking somebody that doesn't know you to pour hours of their time into you is just not a good strategy for success. You have to become somebody who is willing to figure it out. And that's something that I've experienced in my own life. Even as a physician now, I sometimes will get random emails from people that I do not know saying, will you be my mentor? And it's like, I don't know how you were taught, but that is not an effective way to land a mentor. Like, why would somebody who doesn't know you email you back and take time out of their day for free to answer your unlimited questions about something, right? Usually you get a mentor because somebody knows you. Usually you get a mentor because somebody wants to pour into you. They like you. They want to help you, but you have to build that rapport first. And even if you try to build that rapport, that person is still really, really busy. And so you have to find a way to become somebody who figures it out instead of just relying on somebody to just tell you everything that you need to know. And this is the information age. We've got tons of ways to find out information. We've got podcasts. We've got books, we've got YouTube, we've got AI, you got LinkedIn, you got conferences, there's free information on the internet that you can find. Like, be somebody who figures it out. I remember reading a book one time, and I don't even remember which book this was, but they were essentially talking about how one of the ways to make yourself invaluable at your job or in the workplace is to become someone who just figures it out. Anybody who's worked at any place long enough can quickly spot problems or inefficiencies. And nothing is more annoying than working with somebody who constantly brings up problems and constantly brings up the inefficiencies and constantly complains about them. And I'm not saying that you have to turn a blind eye to them, but I'm just saying there's so much value in being someone who is willing to just figure it out. You notice a problem, figure out a solution. You notice an efficiency, figure out a way to make it more efficient. Be someone who is invaluable to your boss. And you can become invaluable to your boss, to your workplace by being somebody who figures it out, being somebody who gets stuff done instead of constantly asking other people for help and questions. It's just like being someone who figures it out. There are a lot of things that I do not know, but one of the things that I think that I am very skilled at is figuring out how to find the information. And I think with the invention of AI, it's become easier than ever to do that. You can pick your AI tool of choice, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, whatever, and you can literally ask it whatever question. You can say, I have this skill and that skill, or I like doing this and I like doing that. Can you help me turn this into a business? What are some ways that I can turn this into a business? What are the first steps that I should take? What is the email that I should send out? And yes, you got to play with it a little bit and you got to change up that language and you got to put things in your own words, but it has never been easier to find out how to create a business, how to make money, how to monetize something. And so use those tools, especially the free ones that are at your disposal. We have access to endless information and we have the tools that we need in order to create the life that we want. We just got to utilize them. And that's one of the things that I really took away is like, it doesn't matter if we had all the advantages in the world. It doesn't matter if we had all of the disadvantages in the world. We can find a way out of it and to stop letting our excuses or the things that we don't have limit us, but to be someone who figures it out. And so if you're someone who's been saying, I don't know about whatever it is, something in your career, something in your business, something in your home life or whatever, spend an hour this week trying to figure it out. Put it into Google. Be someone who figures it out. Make a point to figure out at least one thing that you don't know this week and make that a habit. Make that a habit. And it might include outsourcing it, paying for help, but just be somebody who figures it out. Another lesson that I thought was really interesting that I took away from it was to try to get as close to the sun as possible. What does that mean? That means find people doing what you want to do and get close to them. Not to copy them, not to bother them, but to learn. If you see someone who's really good at business, like being around them, just being in their presence, being in their orbit, learning how they negotiate, how they run meetings, how they make decisions, how they build relationships. Sometimes we admire people from a distance when we should be admiring them and learning from them up close. In Emma's book, she really talks about how she believes that people who really want to be very successful at their jobs need to go in person into the office. And she says that because oftentimes your boss is there in person and you need to be as close to the sun as possible. The people who get thought of first for promotions are the people who are visible and the people who are learning from the people that are ahead of them. And so being as close to the sun as possible. And that doesn't mean being close to them to ask them a bunch of questions and to make their day more inefficient. It might mean that you volunteer to help them with something so you can be close to them. It might mean that you take an internship. It might mean that you volunteer or you work for less money initially so that you can learn from them. I remember when, I was graduating from Duke actually, and I wanted to work in policy. I thought I was going to change the world at 22. I took a very low paying job actually at the Center on Budget, but I'm so glad that I took that job because it taught me so much. I was able to be around the people who created the policies for the people on Capitol Hill, that created and wrote the policies for the politicians. And I was able to understand the inner workings of having a good idea and making it politically feasible and working with people on different sides of the aisle and finding ways to make it more palatable to the constituency. Like I was able to learn so much. And so even though I wasn't getting paid a lot, I learned a lot. And I was able to take those lessons into other facets of my life and facets of my career, even now as a physician. It's the same thing as, when I was thinking about going into sports medicine, I spent a lot of time working with other sports docs. And sometimes I got to treat patients myself at that time, but a lot of times I was just watching them and I was shadowing them and I was learning, okay, how do they examine a patient? How do they explain this thing to a patient in a different way? Oh, I really like that. I'm going to take that and use it. Or actually, I really don't like that. I'm going to be sure to avoid that. When I was on the sidelines and I was covering LA Lakers games and LA Dodgers games or what have you, I would sit next to the head team docs because I was the assistant at the time. I would sit next to the head team docs and I would think about, okay, how are they managing the situation? How are they keeping their cool in the midst of the chaos? How are they navigating scenarios where different people want different things from them? How are they delegating tasks so that they are not doing everything themselves? And I remember just again, getting as close to the sun as possible, watching people who are ahead of me and how they navigated things and how they did things, and being willing to put in the time to learn from them without always just asking a bunch of questions and asking them to be a mentor, right? Just being as close to the sun as possible, learning from other people that are ahead of where you are. And so my sort of takeaway or challenge for you for this is to make a list of 3 people doing what you want to do. Maybe you want to podcast and you want to make a list of 3 really prominent podcasters. Maybe you want to write a book and you want to make a list of 3 authors. Maybe you want to start a business and become an entrepreneur. And so make a list of 3 people doing that. Maybe you want to learn how to monetize social media. And so you're making a list of people who have learned how to monetize on social media. Maybe you want to advance at your job. And so you're making a list of 3 people who, are where you want to be at in your job. List those people and then ask yourself, how can I get closer to their orbit? Maybe it is setting a meeting with them. Maybe it is watching them do something better than you or different from you. Maybe it is helping them with a project. I know in my work as a physician, I do a lot of sports medicine. I do not do a lot of family medicine, even though I am board certified in family medicine. And one of the things that I had just wanted to get good at is, when I am teaching the residents in clinic, I want to be able to show them ways to become more efficient. And so one of the things that I did was take time out of my day and literally shadow one of the family medicine docs that I thought was really efficient. And I am watching him do things. I'm watching what he clicks in Epic, and I'm watching him make these macro phrases and all of these things, smart phrases, all the things. And I'm learning how to be more efficient. And it wasn't me taking time out of his day and asking for a meeting. It was me literally taking time out of my day to watch him do what he does best. So, that's an example of me just trying to get closer to somebody and trying to learn how to be more efficient and get better at what I do. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that I gleaned is to get as close to the sun as possible. Be visible to the people that have the power to promote you and that have the power to advocate for you. You want to be somebody that people think of, whose name get brought up when the powers that be are in meetings and they're talking about who to promote and they're talking about who to give certain opportunities to. You want to be the name that pops up. And in order to be that name that pops up, you have to be visible. Something else that I took away from this book or that I was thinking about as I was reading was strategic partnerships can accelerate growth. One of the things that I really loved about Emma's career is that she doesn't insist on doing everything herself. She partners. You'll find if you ever read the book is that she had always wanted to create a blue jeans company. She loved jeans. And so she always wanted to do jeans in a different way. And do you know what she did? She partnered with Khloe Kardashian, somebody super famous that had a lot of reach. And they were able to create Good American together that ended up being wildly successful. Even when she was approached to partner with the company Off Season, they make feminine looking clothes for females who were interested in sports. So Kristen Juszczyk created all of these like tailored and customized pieces. She famously created this jacket that Taylor Swift ended up wearing during one of the Chiefs football games that went viral. So she created this or wanted to start this company called Off Season and partnered with Emma Grede to do it. And in the book, Emma Grede was talking about how instead of trying to figure out how to do everything from scratch and how to reach out and attract sports fans from all over the world, she decided to partner with the company Fanatics because they were already doing something similar. And how sometimes it is best to partner with other people instead of starting from scratch. You're going to hit so many bumps along the way as you advance in your career. Try to avoid the bumps that you can avoid. If there is somebody who can help you avoid some of the obstacles, why not partner with them? And I think that this is a lesson for all of us. The right partnerships can save us years. Many physicians, many entrepreneurs, many ambitious folks, we try to build businesses alone. We create courses alone. We launch practices alone. We market ourselves alone. And sometimes the fastest path forward is partnering with somebody who is stronger where you're weak. I remember when we started this podcast, Brittany actually reached out to me and we decided to start this podcast. And I remember as we were getting started on things, one of the reasons why I felt so good about our partnership is because we had different strengths. She was more of the tech person and I am totally like, that is not my strong suit. I've gotten better, but it's not my strong suit. And then, there are certain things that I was really good at in terms of partnerships and collaborating with other businesses. That was something that was a strong suit of mine. And so when we partnered together, we could just get a lot further because some things I knew that I could accelerate our growth and other things she knew and she could accelerate our growth. And so just asking yourself, right, taking some time to reflect and think, what am I trying to build alone that could move faster with help? Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a book, maybe it's something in your career. Maybe this means outsourcing. One of the things that I learned from Brittany is to outsource. Sometimes I think that we are, or at least I'll speak for myself, I'm so in that frugal mindset where I'm like, oh, okay, I know how to do this, so I will do it myself. But there's power in outsourcing because maybe you could pay someone to do something and maybe it's a lot cheaper for you to pay them than to spend your time doing it. Your time is really valuable. You could spend your time doing the important tasks and then outsource the other tasks. And maybe you could get a lot further if you were able to delegate and outsource tasks instead of trying to do everything yourself. Maybe you are your own bottleneck in terms of how successful you could become and how quickly you progress forward in your business and in your partnership. And so thinking about how can I elicit help? How can I delegate tasks? How can I partner with others? Another one of the lessons that I was reminded of when I was reading this book is that failure is not the enemy. Yeah, I think a lot of us don't pursue some of the big goals that we have because we're afraid to fail publicly, especially physicians, right? We're used to being really competent. We don't want to look foolish. And Emma repeatedly talks about failing being necessary. One of the quotes that I especially love is the quote, "The ascent to greatness is rarely pretty." And again, I'm reminded of something that my mentor told me, which was like, Lisha, stop fearing failure or rejection. Accept it, expect it, and keep going despite it. Again, stop fearing failure or rejection, accept it, expect it, and keep going despite it. When she was teaching me about how to pitch myself for paid speaking gigs, she was like, there's so many people who want to be a paid speaker and they email somebody one pitch or submit one proposal and get rejected and they feel defeated and they're discouraged and they don't keep going. But, one of the quotes that I love in this book is Emma Grede is like, basically, if you're not failing, you're not learning or getting stronger and your ambition probably isn't big enough. Failure is a part of the process, right? You need to receive enough no's. I remember, again, my mentor, when we were talking about paid speaking gigs, she was like, you should get to a point where you keep pitching until you get like 50 no's, right? You keep sending out emails. You keep sending out pitches. Yes, you're going to get rejected. Yes, some people are going to ignore you, but keep going. So whatever it is that you're applying for as you're listening to this, maybe you're thinking about a new job, a grant, a speaking opportunity, a publishing deal, a sponsorship, you're going to hear no a lot. And that's okay. Again, accept it, expect it, keep going despite it. you should actually get to the point where you set a rejection goal. I remember my mentor being like, okay, like I said, we're going to get 50 no's this month. So keep sending out pitches until you get 50 no's. It's not about an achievement goal. It's not about a rejection goal. It's about like keep going despite it. You might achieve a lot more than you think. A lot of times this stuff is a numbers game. If you're trying to pitch advertisers, if you only send out one email and you get one rejection, then you're batting 0%. Sometimes you got to send out 100 emails and maybe 10 people respond and you close one deal. It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. The other thing with the not fearing failure is I think that this is the case of why we don't put ourselves out there when we're trying to sell something or when it comes to social media is we're afraid that other people are going to think we're crazy or weird or stupid or whatever. And you just have to get over the opinions of other people and just, again, be like, you know what? I don't care what they think. At least I'm putting myself out there. At least I'm trying. And one of the other things that I learned from this is to ask boldly. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Naomi Lawrence Reed, actually, of Doctoring Differently. And, one of the things I remember her saying is that she never got a raise she didn't ask for. And that really stuck with me because I think a lot of us are waiting for a raise, a promotion, a speaking opportunity, more compensation without ever asking. And one of the quotes that I love is a quote from Oprah that basically said, you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. Again, you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. So it's not about what you deserve. It's not about your market rate. It's about what you have the courage to ask for. So stop waiting for someone to magically appear with what you want and go out and grab it. I remember as I was reading this book, there was this other quote that was basically like, if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes a sacrifice. So essentially, like if you don't create some boundaries around what you want and go after it and try to get it, you're going to look back and you're going to realize that you never achieved it. You have to be willing to sacrifice for what you want, or the thing that you want is going to become the sacrifice. It's going to become the thing that you never get. And so ask for one thing this month that you've been avoiding asking for, whether it's asking something from your partner, asking something from your boss, asking something from your business partner. Don't feel failure. Just ask boldly. Sometimes we don't get things because we didn't ask for them. So don't be afraid to ask boldly. Don't be afraid to go out and grab what you want. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you are interested in your reader like me, maybe you might be interested in getting the book, Start With Yourself. But I just wanted to put this out there. As I was reading the book, there were a lot of things that I was inspired by. And these are some of the lessons that I learned. And as I think about things from like a finance perspective, especially as I think about like, what do I want to achieve in my life? And what are some of the goals that I have? I'm reminded to think boldly in terms of how much do I want to invest each month? What is the net worth goal that I have by a certain age? How much money do I want to bring in each month? What are the different ways that I could make money? Not that I'm particularly struggling from a finance perspective, but one of the mind shifts that I've had over the last couple of years is stop trading my time for money. Not that that's a bad thing. Not that that's a bad thing. For me, I'm like, how can I make more money without leaving my home? Not because I'm lazy, but because I want to conserve my energy. I already have a main job in which I'm dealing with patients, treating patients, that sort of thing. And it's exhausting as is. And so I don't really want to trade more of my time to earn money. And I'm trying to think, what are some other ways that I could earn and bring in money using the skill set that I have, using the things that I already have at my disposal, and maybe gleaning some ideas from other people, looking around and taking some inspiration from some folks that I know that, are in my network, looking on LinkedIn, asking AI, researching some various things that I might be interested in, just really thinking outside of the box and leveling up myself and reminding myself to think boldly. What are the next steps that I want to take in my business and how can I get there and how can I achieve it? And if you don't know, again, put it in AI, put it in AI. I mean, I think this is really helpful. You can literally say, hey, I have this business or that business. Help me come up with a strategic plan. Help me figure out how I can make X amount of dollars each month. What are some ideas that you have for me? What are my first steps that I could take charge of? What can you do for me? What are some things that I have to outsource? AI is great with that. I'm not saying that you have to take everything that the system, comes up with at face value, but I'm saying it's a start. And so, take these lessons and challenge yourselves. As I was talking about, the first thing was to ask yourself, what dream have you quietly shrunk over the past few years and trying to ignite it? The next thing was to pick one thing that you don't know how to do and spend an hour this week trying to figure it out, right? Be someone who figures stuff out. The third thing was to identify a few people already doing what you want to do and ask yourself, how can I get closer to their orbit? How can I be as close to the sun as possible? The next thing is to ask yourself, what are you trying to build alone that could move faster with help, whether that's outsourcing or strategic partnerships? And then I talked about, not being afraid of failure, being willing and accepting that you might get some no's and continuing anyway, learning from your mistakes, learning from failure and using it to propel you forward. And then lastly is to ask boldly. You get in life what you have the courage to ask for. So have the courage, muster the courage to ask for what you want. So ask for one thing this month that you've been avoiding. Hopefully this has been helpful and you've gleaned something from, I guess my conversation with myself, but you've gleaned something from these lessons that I have sort of taken away from this book. And let me know what you think, right? Maybe you've read the book and you have your own thoughts about it. So feel free to email me, wealthmindedmd@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Remember, if you are someone who is in need of insurance, whether that's disability insurance or life insurance, you can contact our partners, Pradeep Auto at PKA Insurance Group. If you are someone who needs tax help, you can contact our partners at Magni Tax Experts. They are excellent and do year-round tax planning for a very, very affordable price. If you are someone who needs help with financial planning, Ben Martinick and his team at Bonafide Finance are happy to help you. If you are someone who is looking for help with your student loans, Student Loan Advice, Student Loan Planner are two fantastic companies who can totally help you with that. So hopefully all these resources are helpful. We will link them in the show notes for you. I can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for Dr. Lisha Taylor. Just so you know, she's not a financial advisor, tax professional, lawyer, or financial planner. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment. Chat with a tax professional and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.